And we go to Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. Hello. Good afternoon to you there in Ukraine, Joe. I have to tell you, I was on your Twitter feed over the weekend, and I really enjoy what you do there with all the visuals. The song you were talking about Friday and the rabbi you were speaking of, we got to see what you were talking about. And if you follow Joseph on Twitter, you will be able to look at those things. Is it just at Joseph Lindsley? Is that how to get there, Joe?
Hey Bob, hello from Kyiv. Yeah, at JP Lindsley on
JP
Twitter.
Lindsley. At JP Lindsley. Thank you.
And you can also go to UkrainianFreedomNews.com, and at the bottom you can find whatever your preferred social media network is. And yeah, there on these other platforms, my team and we try to show the visuals and the videos of life at war. But as I always say, I really appreciate this medium of radio because it forces me. It's easy to take a picture. I mean, it requires a lot of skill that I don't have to take good photos, but to actually describe, what I see and to go beyond what I see and what people feel here. It's such a privilege to be able to do that with you all every day. And I think of and that rabbi, the chief rabbi, Moshe Osman. He's been one of the great characters of this effort for Ukrainian freedom, and he's got two music videos he made over the past months where he walks around Kyiv, and you really get to see how beautiful the city is and how much he loves this place, as a key Jewish leader here in Ukraine, which really deflates of this, the crazy Russian propaganda. Ukraine is an incredibly tolerant and place where people with traditions feel that they can practice their faith in a way that's respected. And over the weekend, last Thursday was Independence Day here, and they've kept for holidays the main thoroughfare in Kyiv. It's called Kreshatyck, and it's this beautiful long avenue. It culminates in the Maidan, where the protests were in 2014, and with very stately buildings on either side. And they close it for holidays for pedestrians. And for the past several days, throughout the entire weekend, they had captured Russian tanks, artillery, and other enemy vehicles that were sort of in a stationary parade all along the middle of Kreshatyck Street. And it was quite a sight to see. You have Ukrainians walking in their traditional vyshyvanka, the embroidered linen. Normally before the big war on Independence Day, there would be parades, there'd be music. There was no music. It was a weird kind of hush as people are walking, men, women, and children, all different ages, touching these Russian tanks that are, most of them are burned out. These are the very tanks that Moscow thought would be parading the streets of Kyiv, February 2022. And here you see it's this reminder of how close the Russians were to taking Kyiv. I was speaking with a friend here in Kyiv last week who said, he was remembering those early hours when, even people who had never picked up a gun were rushing to these sort of distribution points to pick up a firearm, and because they were prepared for guerrilla warfare. And then when you see that, to have this visual of on a peaceful Saturday afternoon, a Sunday afternoon, families walking in their traditional clothes, looking kind of in this sense of silent appreciation, looking at these burned out Russian tanks, knowing that everyone who was on that street, went through that moment of fear, those first hours of the full scale invasion. And now to be there, there's a little sense of victory there, even though, the fight is still difficult. There's not a little sense. It's a big sense of victory to be on that street these past days. There was difficult news over the weekend. On Friday, three of Ukraine's top fighter jet pilots were killed in a training accident. One of them, who was really, by all accounts, the Ukraine's sort of top gun, Andrii Pilshchykov. He was 29 years old. He had done much. I mean, he had intercepted a significant number of Russian missiles and drones. He was really Ukraine's best asset in the air. He also spoke English very well, and he was a key advocate for Ukraine to get F-16s. He would go to Europe and to the U.S. and make the case for it, and he knew his arguments. He was nicknamed Juice by the American fighter pilots who trained him because he doesn't drink alcohol. So the American Fighter pilots called him Juice, and they had this great rapport. But he was killed in a training accident using a Czech, a training jet made by the Czechs that's used all over the world, along with two other Ukrainian fighter pilots, Vyacheslav, Minka, and Sergiy Prokazin. And so this is a big loss. And Juice was so excited about the prospect of actually getting these F-16s here. The kingdoms of Denmark and the Netherlands have promised 61 F-16s. The first of those will be arriving hopefully later this year. And Americans were going to go train in Arizona. They will. It's starting from October. And so it is a major loss. But, some of the propaganda, you can always see, the nasty Russian responses to this. And they said, this shows that Ukraine is not ready for these advanced jets. But these accidents happen, unfortunately, even in America.
Sure.
And we had that awful news on Sunday. The American helicopter, the Marines were training on an island off the coast of Australia, and 3 Marines were killed. Many more were injured when an American-made Osprey helicopter crashed. And this is a reminder. I mean, these even with the best technology, there still is these things are dangerous. And so it's no commentary on the intelligence of the Ukrainian fighters. And so certainly Juice, I mean, he there's probably many people in many cities who are still alive because of what he did up in the air so often until his death.
I hate hearing that story, and I'm sure you're right. Juice probably was hoping for the day he could fly those F-16s that are coming. On a brighter note, we talk about how desperate Ukraine is for help, for arms, for equipment, weapons, more soldiers. But we're hearing now that it's highly likely that Russia canceled a major joint strategic military exercise because they have not enough troops and not enough equipment available. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, well, as I always say, skeptical, whatever we hear from Russia. But I think this is what I felt very viscerally walking on that Kreshatyck street in Kyiv the past several days. It's been now 2 Ukrainian Independence Days since Russia's big invasion, and Ukraine is not only holding on, but people are thriving. People are finding ways to live, and I think this is for those in the West who are maybe still nervous about Russia. It's because they focus too much on the headlines. Again, as we talked about last week, it was on Ukrainian Independence Day. It was the stories of Prigozhin that dominated the headlines, and that serves psychologically to make people afraid. Oh, be afraid of Putin because he'll kill you in a plane crash. But what it really shows is great division within the Russian leadership. I mean, if anyone were to say that this would happen over a year ago, when the Wagner group, Prigozhin's mercenary group, was so essential to Russia's war effort, and that was really the most feared legion of Russians was the Wagner group, and now it's basically collapsed and its leader's dead. And so we can see that, yes, Russia can still cause horrible damage and put people through nights of terror. We had air alarms through the night in much of the country. It turns out they were false alarms. Russians were simulated missile launches toward Odessa. They can terrorize people and they can cause a lot of damage, but they're weak and certainly they're losing. And the worst thing, and the argument from Ukraine is the worst thing that the world can do is to slow down the support in this moment, because that will give Russia a chance to rebuild. As we see in the counteroffensive, maybe and the Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief, has always said everyone needs to be patient, and it's been many months. But if you start to look at the maps now, you can see in the town of Robotny in Zaporizhia, Ukrainians have taken this town back. They're pushing through the Russian fortifications, and we can maybe begin to see a strategy of very methodical wearing down of the Russian lines. And that's what Ukrainians are doing until the moment arrives when there are fighter jets here. And then I think with that type of support, this could be over quite swiftly, more than we could even imagine.
Wow, wouldn't that be something? And this report about Russia canceling a major military exercise comes from the UK Ministry of Defense, pretty reliable source. Joseph,
I trust them.
Yeah, right. Certainly more than the Russians. We'll talk tomorrow, and a reminder on Twitter, if you want to see what we're talking about here, at JP Lindsley. And that's Lindsley at JP Lindsley. Thanks, Joe. We'll talk tomorrow.
Thank you, Bob. Until tomorrow.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Що він сказав?
Well, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?